My name's Dr. Darren Mort, and I'm about to be on the Prosperity Show, which I'm excited about. We're going to be talking about my background and how it's led to what I'm actually doing now as far as creating resources for children to help them navigate family violence and parental separation. So I'm very excited about that.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to yet another exciting episode of the Online Prosperity Show, where we don't just scratch the surface, we dive deep. I'm your host, Taruvinga, and in case you're just tuning in, this is the #1 place to get exclusive behind-the-scenes insights into methods, strategies, and breakthroughs from the real lives of people solving real problems. So maybe you're grappling with challenges in your life or business. You want to see how somebody has also climbed through those challenges. And guess what? This is your go-to show for that. Now, today I'm thrilled to introduce the man, the myth, the legend, Dr. Darren Mort.
Hey, Pros.
How are you doing today?
Yeah, good. I don't know about the legend, but I'm here.
Well, you know what they say, you are innocent until proven guilty, right? So since you're here, might as well plead your case, my good sir. Now, for those that are tuning in for the very first time and meeting Dr. Darren Mort, he is a family law barrister, mediator, author, filmmaker, and also a children's advocate. So in short, he's a man who's doing all the tough work to be giving voice to the voiceless and actually rewriting what justice can look like for families under stress. Now, a lot of us might be going through stuff and don't quite know who to turn to and how to actually navigate these things. And that's the reason why we brought in Darren for us to have a chat around that. So today's conversation is obviously going to challenge you to think, about where you stand, either with family law, children law, conflict, and above all, healing. But it's for entertainment purposes only. And I think, obviously, whatever Darren is going to say cannot be constituted as legal advice. Now, Darren, you see, I could go on and maybe start incriminating myself before we even get started.
There's a few waivers there, Prosper. I'm proud of you.
Oh, absolutely. And thank you so much. The last thing I need is to have to then be going minute by minute, having to plead and defend my case. All right. So tell us a little bit about your journey, Darren. I mean, obviously, before law, before charity, before the books and the films, who was Darren? And what did the world make out of him?
Yeah, look, I don't know. I think Darren always thought he'd be doing something to assist people socially when Darren was a little boy. Darren, growing up, didn't exactly have a happy childhood. I was exposed to a lot of family violence along the way. But despite what was a difficult childhood, I think Darren was very ambitious, very inspired about what life had to offer, and went to university and studied law science. I worked a job. Initially, I was cleaning toilets and bathrooms and whatever, because I was very young when I started university. I was just 16 going on 17, so I was too young to work in restaurants and hotels. And when I turned 18, I got a job at a hotel where I used to work behind the bar and work in the kitchen and do things that you do. And I finished my university. I did law science. I majored in pathology and organic chem, like a pre-med, I suppose. And then my marks were pretty good with science, and they offered me a subject called forensic medicine, which was in the medical faculty. So I did autopsies for 6 months as an assistant pathologist, if you like, working around various hospitals. And then I completed my law degree and finally decided I'd do law instead of medicine, and ended up working in the city for a fellow called David Bullard, who's just passed away, but he's one of my first mentors, and he was incredible. I have an uncle who was a mentor too, but a professional mentor who was a lawyer was David. And then I worked for a couple of year and a half as a solicitor, worked down the country for a year, got some experience on my feet, made lots of mistakes where no one could see me. And then one of the judges came to the country on circuit and said, why don't you come back with me for a couple of years and work as my associate in the county court? And that was John Hassett. So I worked with him for 2 years, and he was another incredible mentor and an incredible humanitarian. And I learned a significant amount from him, not only about the law, but in the way of social justice. So that's what started. In 1990, I decided to go to the bar and become a barrister. I read with Howard Mason, who was a county court judge now. I don't know whether he's retired now, but now, so I've been to the bar for about 35 years, and I started doing crime, but family law really found me, and that's what I've been doing for most of my time at the bar, being a family lawyer.
Absolutely, and thank you so much for giving us, that condensed version of 30 years of awesomeness. Now, you did mention, obviously, as a kid, you were ambitious, and also you then hinted to having a role model that was an uncle at that particular point. Yeah. What was the frame of reference that the uncle sort of gave, which helped in you formulating your path?
Yeah, well, I think, as I said, I had a difficult childhood. My parents didn't exactly get on towards the end and separated, then got back together. And I think it's important in life to have mentors. And he was very close to the family and someone that I respected. And I was able to feel comfortable enough to sit down with him and get advice. So he provided me with some sound wisdom along the way. And as a kid, I guess I took a lot of that on board, and it held me in good stead. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And also, thank you so much for sharing the part about the family sort of being in the state that it was. So if I may just venture to have a glimpse into what that looked like for a young kid growing up in that sort of area, you'd come back from school and...
Yeah. Oh, look, there was a lot of fighting in the house. At times there was physical violence. It was difficult. And look, I don't really sit there in judgment on my parents. I think they probably did the best they could. They probably shouldn't have remained married. They got married very young, and I don't think they were sort of malicious. But in those days, we didn't know a lot what we know now in terms of how conflict impacts on children, emotionally, psychologically, physically, and I think a lot of parents now, there's a lot of resources out there to teach them how to manage that sort of conflict a lot better for the sake of their kids. So, for me and my sisters, it wasn't too flash at times. But look, we got on with it. And I think the lesson is don't live your life carrying that burden on your shoulders. Just get on with life, Life's a gift. And a lot of times things aren't perfect for people, but you have to... I'm a bit of a half-glass full man rather than half-glass empty, and I like to be positive about things. And I think going through those times as a child, you learn. We had a dear Franciscan priest who was a good friend of the family. He used to ride a Harley Davidson and take us kids on dinks and whatever. And at times when it was tough, he used to say to us, look, you might sit back and judge your parents for all their mistakes, but one day you're going to grow up and make a whole set of mistakes yourself. So be careful what you judge.
Well, absolutely. And I think that's really sound advice, because from what you're saying, they did what they did with the best information and
Yeah,
know-how and stage of who they were at that particular time. So who are
sure.
we and put in our own frame of reference. Now, that alone sort of sets the stage of, you did mention at some point at age 16 you were already out and about, trying to make things work. Did that mean you had to grow up quick in that particular environment, in order for
Oh,
you to emancipate yourself?
yes, definitely, Prosper. I think myself and my sisters, we all grew up very quickly. Yeah. Um, yeah, I think having children myself, I think how fortunate they are, because they actually had really fond memories to reflect upon. We didn't have many fond memories to reflect upon, and certainly the childhood was taken away from us as a result of that. But again, I try not to dwell on that as a negative. I try to think, well, perhaps it forced me to consider my future a lot more intensely than what other kids would, and it put me onto a particular pathway, which I'm very grateful for.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, to whom much is given, much is required. And I would think from what you then went on and did, that would have been a really good springboard for you to actually get started. And thank you so much for letting us know on that. You keep referring to sisters as part of your
Sure.
family setup. How did they handle their own come up?
Um, Look, differently than me. And I think in my practice as a family lawyer, I see that all the time. Kids are unique little beings.
Right.
They all have their independent needs and wants and desires and hopes. And I think it impacted on my sisters very differently. One of my sisters, she runs from conflict at any opportunity. She can't deal with it. My other sister um, is very outgoing, and she probably tries overly to impress when she doesn't need to. So I think it impacts on kids in all different ways, and we know that from a lot of research that's been done. So when I'm in a family law case, I never refer to the children as just one group. I always refer to them independently, and how the impact of their parental breakdown is impacting on them as a sibship and as each individual child, how they're travelling. And I think that's important.
Absolutely. And obviously that's the reason why I'm framing this question, because each and every one of us view things differently, and that
Yeah.
actually affects the outcome of,
Yep.
who they become as adults and things of that nature. But you went on and started working, in your field of medicine and things like that. Was that an aspiration, or was that because your marks were good at that particular time?
No, it was an aspiration. Even if I didn't get the marks, I would have done it somehow. Yeah.
Fantastic. And thank you so much for that. And obviously, as you progressed, you came across a few people that showed you the path. And, here we are. You are now in the field of family law. Now, when would you say you first got the sense of starting to work with children or giving children a voice? If that would be a great place to start.
Yeah, sure. Look, family law, of course, that is the job, trying to achieve the best interest for children. I think when you're a young practitioner, it's hard to understand that concept, because you have no idea. I suppose a curious advantage for me was from the place I came as a child growing up. I already had a sense of that. So, although I was young, I had that experience. So I think that held me in good stead. The thing that doesn't hold you in good stead is that you're very young and you get older clients come to you and they must look at you thinking, what the hell do you know about life? But for me, I did know a hell of a lot about life before I started family law. And so I had that background. Where the real crossroads happened for me was in or about 2016 when I was seconded to the Domestic Violence Task Force Committee reporting to the Royal Commission on Family Violence. That's where the crossroad for me was, because I'd endured a number of years being a family law barrister, and I could see how the system let down people a lot. I could see the costs, the delays, the inconsistencies with advice given. And I really thought that maybe the system needed a big shake-up and we needed to do things better, something aside from just adding in extra sections into the Family Law Act by way of amendments. So I was on that committee and I was involved with a lot of people. There were about 15 on the committee, but a lot of people who were doing so much tremendous work in the community. There were, women's legal aid lawyers. There were people who provide housing to victims of family violence. There were men's behavioural change program organisers. There were the police. There were magistrates, other lawyers, all sorts of things. They just people, even people operating food vans or organising food for distribution for victims of family violence and the like. So incredible work. But I looked, given the way I think, my brain's very image driven, and I looked upon these people as like sitting in these ambulances at the bottom of a cliff waiting for families to drop so that they could provide some triage to them in terms of what they needed. And I thought it'd be really nice to put on your backpack and trudge up that cliff to the cliff face and stop people jumping in the first place by providing them with resources. So that was my idea. And that's really what started our charity, To Be Loved Network, which was co-founded with myself and Nancy Bassett and my wife. And we started this organisation, which is a registered charity with full DGR status, to provide resources to children navigating family violence and parental separation. So effectively providing resources to give them a voice. So that's where it all started.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, reporting to the Royal Commission on Family Violence, this is, like the League of Nations, where everything else, the buck stops with that. And, that is heavy territory right there, Darren. Did you maybe during that time start really having some sort of internal conflict because you're seeing exactly the people that are supposed to be making things better? Like you say, they're sitting right at the bottom of the cliff and not doing anything. And you're thinking that could have been me as a child, and nobody's actually out here noticing what is actually happening. Were there any things that would have risen up on your end? I mean, like triggers or things that would have...
Yeah, I suppose so. I suppose indirectly it did. It wasn't that those people were doing nothing. Those people do tremendous work in the community, and we should be very grateful for the amount of people. They're unsung heroes. They do so much free work for the community. They give up their time and they provide fantastic supports for people. But I was looking at doing something more intrinsic, doing something that would help behavioural change and an impact on people, so that positive change in their parenting would mean that the children would benefit as a result. So it's not so much wanting people to get on, because people are hurt by marriage breakdowns and often they blame each other, and sometimes they don't get over that hurt, which I understand. I get it. It's terrible when if your partner lets you down or your marriage comes to an end or your relationship. But it's more about getting people to be responsible parents and getting them to act in a way that their behaviour is positive towards each other in front of the child. And that's what we've really been focused on.
Now,
yeah,
obviously, your life story and your journey really has so much that would have prepared you for this particular position. I mean, the empathy, the actual,
yeah,
way of being, and that intricate
sure.
understanding. Because
Yep.
in any other given moment, people would
Yep.
just hear a lawyer or a barrister and start
Yes.
assuming Suits. What's that guy, from Suits? Always
Oh,
pimp
yeah.
somebody cold,
Yes.
very technical
Yes.
and distant. Is there
Yes.
any misconception that people have around your industry? And would there be something that you hope people would actually understand, that you guys are there to help, not necessarily for the billable hours?
Oh, absolutely. And look, our charity, none of us get paid. We've got a board of about 8 now, I think, or 8 or 9, but none of us get paid. Everything's pro bono. We're there not for the money, but to create change. Then that's the main thing, Prosper.
You see, the reason why I would have put this through, I mean, as a legal, expert yourself, you would understand I was leading towards something, because you now write books, you now produce films, you mediate, you're so far distance from, what's his name, Spectre, from
Yes. Yeah.
and that's a lot of hats. Now, how do you then manage the seriousness of being in a courtroom and also being the court jester, so to speak?
Yeah. Well, I just do my job. It's what I'm used to. I think every barrister has their own style, and my style might be a bit more flamboyant and out there than a lot of barristers, but it's probably because I'm a trained actor as well, and I think that holds me in good stead in terms of appearing publicly, because I'm quite grounded in relation to what I do. So I don't know. You do wear a lot of hats, maybe because I'm a Gemini and I'm a bit of a chameleon. But I do, But I love acting because acting gives me a break from being Darren Mort. It gives me an opportunity to explore another character and have fun with that. And as I've got older, I feel like my acting has become a lot more solid because I am able to jump into other characters and envelop them and take them on their journey. So, yeah, I'm lucky that I can do that. But I really think no matter what you do, whether it's playing golf or, Tai Chi or, sailing a boat, whatever you want to do, I think it's really important to have an interest outside your work, because life can't be all work and no play. And I think you need to give your brain that mental balance to be able to switch on and off. Because when you're in a court case, you are fully on, you are switched on. I did a trial last week, and for 5 days, I lived, dreamt, slept that trial. I was on 100%. And you're flooded with information, which is contained in here. And if you're on top of the case and you've prepared it properly, there's a lot of responsibility that comes with presenting your client's case, your client's view of the world, and trying to persuade a court that that's going to advance a child's best interests.
Absolutely. And you for one would know that, yes, it is the proceedings of a court and the ruling of the judge, but that is somebody's life at the end of the day. You know what I mean?
That's right. And we're very privileged. I never forget that. As a lawyer, we are very privileged people in terms of being voyeurs into people's lives. And we need to take on that responsibility 100% and listen to your client, validate their concerns, give appropriate advice, and make sure that they understand that advice, so that when they give you instructions what to do, you can be satisfied that they've taken on board what you say, even if they don't agree with you at the end of the day. So it's a very, very privileged position to be in, and I'm very grateful that I have that opportunity.
Oh, absolutely. Now, there's a point where you mentioned that the current system and setup is ambulances that are waiting at the bottom of the cliff,
Yeah.
and the whole thing should be turned around its head to actually have people putting on backpacks and going to meet the people in at the top of the cliff, so to speak. Now, is this you hiking to the top of the cliff by you using storytelling, books, and films to reach people while they're still at the top before they actually decide to make that leap?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely, absolutely, Prosper. So the first resource we produced was a book called Tommy and Tiger Terry, which was launched in Parliament House in 2019. And then later on that year, we produced our first film, Tommy. And why I mentioned Tommy, just on what you've been talking about, is that Tommy was a very successful short film. About a child having to navigate changeovers between the parents on a weekend. That film is now embedded in a parenting program in the United States of America through the National Center for State Courts. So judges can now start ordering people partake in this parenting program, which involves looking or watching our film Tommy, which is really amazing. Why I think it's even more important is that the courts decided to carry out some research on this parenting program before it was launched, and it was determined by evidence-based research, which is the most important research you can get to validate the importance of the product, is that it didn't change the way parents felt about each other, but it changed the way they behaved in front of their children. And as I said before, that's really crucial, because at the end of the day, I don't really care what people think about each other. That doesn't worry me. It's what they do and say in front of the child. And the evidence-based research on that parenting program, which is called Families in Transition, is really crucial to our mandate, and that is to assist children navigate family violence and parental separation. So I'm very blessed to have Judge Cohen in America. He's fully supported the project together with Alicia Davis at the National Centre for State Courts and our researcher, Carey. She's done an amazing job. So it's just wonderful having those support people around you. And whatever you do in life, you need support people around you, because it takes a village to make something that's really important. You can't do it by yourself. I just think people are stupid if they don't collaborate. They don't put a network of people around them who sing from the same songbook. I think people will never get to where they want to get to, insofar as the finish line. But if you put positive people around you who, as I said, sing from your songbook as well, that's when the magic's made.
Oh, absolutely. I think in my culture, we've got a statement: if you want to go far, you go alone. But if you want to go further, you go together. Yes, you might have the expertise.
I love that.
Yeah, you might have the expertise to do one certain thing, but somebody somewhere would also be the catalyst and the amplifier that actually makes things to actually start happening. And what's been...
Yeah, and I was just going to say, it's incredible because after Tommy, which no doubt we'll talk about, but I wrote a book, but then we produced a film called Millie. Yep. And I wrote a kid's book, which was, the back part of the book is partly written by my daughter, who's a clinical psychologist, asking parents questions to ask their kids. But Millie's a great example. So Millie, we had, I don't know, it must have been 35 people or something. We brought this village together to create a film about a little girl who's navigating her own parents' breakdown. And that film, we shot it down at Phillip Island in Victoria. And as I said, we had about, I don't know, 30 people, 35 people, production and crew and whatever. We hired 7 houses down at Phillip Island. My wife did most of the catering and assisted by runners who would run the meals between the houses. And it was just an incredible experience of like-minded people getting together to make a really special film. Now, that film's only been out for a few months. It's already won 6 film awards, and it's a great little film. It's beautifully shot. Through the kindness of people, we did it a lot cheaper than what it would ordinarily cost. And it was a lot of money. We had fantastic sponsors, Australian Family Lawyers and Vincent Papaleo and Associates, Just Fund, you know, Smoke Ball. The list goes on. I shouldn't mention sponsors because I always forget, you know, who put in what. But when I say who put in what, there's so many people that contributed. But our major sponsor was Australian Family Lawyers, and they have just been so supportive, because you say, you know, if you want to go far, do it alone. If you want to go further, it takes a village. And so they've just aired Millie with Just Fund right around Australia with audiences, getting the message out there. And yeah, it has taken a village of people, and it's been a tremendous journey. And I've learned so much, not only about human nature, but in terms of the compelling messages a film like that, how it can impact people. So yeah, I'm probably talking too much, am I? But
Oh, no,
I just get very not only emotional, but I also get very excited and feel blessed about the people that touch my life and the impact that they make.
So if Netflix comes knocking on your door, you will throw your barrister hat out the window and pursue the acting career then, I suppose?
Yeah, look, I'd like to. I'm currently negotiating with a few people in terms of feature films and family law series. So, you know, if the universe wants that to happen, it hopefully will drop in my lap. If it doesn't, it's not meant for me.
Oh, absolutely. Now, you also did sort of allude to the fact that you've gone on and had a family of your own. Some people would be like, how has that been for you? Are you acting in the way that you are the person you are today, or maybe the footsteps of the parents might have lingered in there? I don't know how you would answer such a question.
Yeah, look, I don't know. That's a hard question. I think your upbringing has to linger because it's part of you, and you shouldn't be ashamed of that. In fact, you should be proud that you were able to change the way you parent as opposed to the way your parents did their job. And again, I'm not critical of that, but my wife and I rarely fight. Rarely. I could probably count on five hands, you know. I'm sorry, one hand, five fingers of how many times we've had an argument. And our children haven't been exposed to any family violence at all. So they've had a very different upbringing than what I had. And I think that's a really good thing. So I think, yes, your history makes you, but it's important that it doesn't break you. You know, it's important that you learn from that. And I really get over people. I don't have a lot of time for people who blame, because blaming, in my view, is a lack of responsibility for your own actions.
Right.
And yes, you can blame people, but it can cause some struggles for people as a result of their history. I'm not saying that, but I would hope people would have the insight and the courage to move forward, you know, with their backgrounds, if they haven't been ideal, to be able to learn from those experiences and to move on in a positive direction. Now, if you can't do that yourself, go and get a mental health practitioner to assist you with that. Go and find out about yourself. Go and find out why you can't jump the hurdles that other people jump, and get some assistance. There's some amazing people out there. There's divorce coaches, there's therapists, there's psychologists, there's social workers. Identify your problem and go out and get some help. A life coach. A couple of years ago, I actually got a life coach because I thought, a few of my friends had, and I thought, what a great idea to learn about yourself and to learn about any hurdles you've got. And she was fantastic. She was really good. And I'd have a session with her over Zoom, you know, once every 2 or 3 weeks. And it was just, I walked out of those sessions feeling so good. So it can make a difference to yourself if you're stuck in a rut.
Oh, absolutely. And I quite like what you just mentioned. And thank you so much for taking us on that, because, when you blame someone, you're proverbially pointing a finger at them. One finger is pointing at that particular person, but you've got those three fingers that are pointing back at you, which means the onus is on you to actually, get yourself out of that particular situation. But I come across a statement in Australia, which I'm still yet to figure out where it actually stands and how somebody would actually feel good saying that. And maybe I could be wrong. You could debunk that for me. But the statement should be all right, mate. You know what I mean? Like people will just leave will just leave things as they are and not put themselves in to actually solve that particular situation. Could that be the cause of what's actually happening around, where people are not taking full ownership because they just hope something is going to turn around and eventually things, deteriorate, and before you know it, there's a whole story that you no longer are in control with, because when the courts get involved, that's it, mate.
That's right. I love that analogy with the finger pointing forward and three fingers pointing back. I always think of that too, Prosper, because it's human beings are not very good at taking on responsibility. And it's too easy to say, oh, yeah, you're the cause of that problem, or she'll be, as you said, she'll be right, mate. Well, I think that it's the old Australian adage, but I think these days, and particularly with the world, how small the world's become, it's that old adage of she'll be right, mate. Nah, it doesn't cut it with me. Nah. She'll be right, mate. It won't be right. It won't be right until you stop pointing that finger, until you start taking on some responsibility, till you do some work on yourself, learn about yourself. I was just doing a case then, and I won't mention any names or whatever, or even the sex or the gender of the parties, but it's a case involving where one parent is a drug taker, and that parent does not take responsibility for their actions and blames the fact that that parent isn't having time with the children, blames the other parent, instead of looking in their own backyard and saying, well, how can I be a better parent to these children? How can I get off drugs? How can I look behind why I take drugs, why I'm addicted to drugs in the first place? What has happened to me as a person that I have such an addictive personality? Or what has happened to me as a person as a result of my childhood and the influences there? Who am I associating with? Why do I take drugs with those people? All those sorts of questions should be raised with that person taking drugs. But unfortunately, they point the finger without looking at the three fingers pointing back. And I see it time and time and time again. And usually those people say, oh, you don't know, I've had a hard life, or, it's not my fault I take drugs or whatever. But it is. It is your fault. I hate blame, but blame can be watered down by actually showing you're doing something, and doing something positive that is going to make you a much better human being and someone who's contributing to our tapestry as a community. That's what we need. We need that. You're not alone. You're not alone with your struggles. There's heaps of resources out there to look for, heaps of people you can talk to. There's a guy up in Queensland who runs Dads in Distress, Mums in Distress, and Children in Distress. He runs it's like a podcast, and he runs an online sessions. He does an amazing job. There's another guy up in Queensland, Tamir, who runs equine therapy for people who are distressed, have depression or have real mental health issues or difficulties coping. There's all these amazing things out there for people these days to latch onto, instead of just not taking responsibility for their actions.
And thank you so much for bringing those up, because so many people, whenever they're faced with a situation, they are into fetal position. Woe is me. How do I protect myself? And whatever actions they will take are going to be centered around themselves sort of first. Now, we often forget that transformation is a difficult and ongoing process. It's something that we
Very.
engage ourselves into, and half the time when we confront most of these things is very, very difficult. Now, for somebody who's maybe listening and they're probably in the middle of a crisis or maybe conflict with either family, business, or in life, and they just are at their wits' end, is there anything that you might just maybe say, hey, you stop that, or hey, you begin to do this, in a way that is, going to save them time, money, and effort having to deal with maybe the court system or the justice system?
Yeah. So, look, most of us have a confidant, a friend that you can talk to. Um, so that's a starting point. Being able to reach out, not be ashamed that you need help, because I find everyone's got their own troubles, and sharing information can be a really positive step forward. If you haven't got someone who can provide you with support, go to your GP, get a mental health plan, um, which is very economical, and speak to a professional in the field. Or a lot of GPs have access to external resources that can help you, you know. Or if you've or even look, a lot of family lawyers have access to a lot of resources as a referral point. I know I do, and I can refer people to all sorts of people who they might need. So, in that sense, where people have already jumped and they've landed on the ambulance, at least there's people down there that can support people with referrals to resources, you know.
Mm.
And and I think as a parent too, when you're going through this hell, it always takes one parent to be the bigger parent, you know, to step up to the plate and compromise, because that's where the gold in resolution is found, by way of compromise. Because separation is a very traumatizing situation, and it's probably the most traumatic event, or one of the most traumatic events you'll ever be exposed to as a human being, apart from child loss and, you know, terminal illnesses, things of that nature. But it's a very traumatic process. And unfortunately, the way the court operates is you're in that process for a couple of years at least. So when you're going through that process, you need support, whether it's good friends, a doctor, a therapist, whatever. You need that crutch. You're not going to be able to do the best for the kids if you haven't got that crutch. So I always say to my clients, you know, imagine you're on an aeroplane when you hear that announcement where they say you get your oxygen mask first and then you put the kids on.
Pretty
That's what
much.
you're going to do. To be a good parent, to be someone who's going to be able to support your children through that process, you've got to be able to support yourself. And the best way to do that is addressing your own trauma in any way you can. Now, I'm not saying there's miracle cures out there, but they will assist you. Even, I hate the amount of people that say, oh, you know, I'm on antidepressants, but I'm trying to get off them. Well, why would you try to get off them when you're going such a traumatizing process? You know, there's no shame in any of that. You break your leg, the doctor puts a cast on it. You know, sometimes medication, where it's professionally prescribed, is good for people to give them that opportunity to get through trauma. So look, there's lots of options out there. So my advice is don't be afraid.
Absolutely. Now, obviously, if somebody is enamored in the way that you present yourself and they feel like, they might find recourse in, the way that you operate, at what point in this journey, like you have said, do they actually start needing to reach out to you? Is it when they're midway through the jump, or when they're looking at the edge, or when they're walking towards the cliff?
Yeah, well, look, my experience, and it's my experience only, um, is that when parties are separating or about to separate, there's always one parent that has been thinking about it for a while, you know. Sometimes it's both, but mostly if we're looking at the 100-metre sprint, usually the party's been who's been thinking about it is 80 metres down the runway track, where the other person's still at the starting gates and it's a bit of a shock to them. So the person who's run the 80 metres has usually got some preliminary advice from a lawyer or surrounded themselves with the appropriate people to give them assistance through that arduous period. So every case is different, Prosper, and I think for the parent that is shocked by the revelation that their marriage is over or being told, I think it's really important for them to get to a doctor first of all and to work with a therapist. They'll probably need some legal advice around that time as well, because information is king. Information means that it puts your mind at ease, because there's so many unknowns when you're going through this journey. And I think the more information you can have, the better. But make sure you front load your situation with the best people possible. Go to a family law specialist, get advice from them in terms of the best therapist to get on board for the children or themselves, or the best family report writers. Front load your case, because then it'll cost you less by the end of the day, because you're not putting out spot fires along that journey. You're addressing the real issues as they confront you.
Absolutely. And speaking of costs and things of that nature, I know you guys deal with billable hours and things of that sort. Having been the Australian Law Awards winner and Barrister of the Year 2022. Now, when somebody's going to reach out to you and maybe decide to start talking to you, how many arms and limbs do they have to part with in order to...
Yeah, well, for me, I'm lucky. I don't do billable hours because I'm a barrister, so we get a fixed fee. So we're employed by a solicitor on an hourly basis, or a fixed fee when we go to court. For people heading off to a solicitor, some firms work on fixed fees. So to get to this stage of the proceedings, it'll cost you X dollars. If we're going to move past that and go to the next stage, it'll cost you that much money. And through the family law rules, solicitors have to file what's called a cost notice at every event, at every court event, so the court knows how much people are spending and what are the projected costs to get to the next phase, and what are the projected costs overall. So all that's disclosed and all that's very transparent. Lawyers who do not do fixed fees engage with clients through a costs agreement. And the costs agreement will set out a schedule in relation to how much certain items cost. So, from an hourly fees to telephone attendances, photocopying, all that sort of stuff. It's all laid out. There's what's called scale fees, which are the fees fixed by the family law rules, or there are what we call party costs, which are the costs that law firm would charge to act for the person. Now, the party costs are going to be a lot more expensive than the scale costs, but I say in family law, and I suppose for other jurisdictions as well, but I'm not an expert there, is that pay peanuts, get monkeys. So you need to front load it with the best people that you can afford, and also don't be scared of lawyers, number one. Number two, don't be scared to get a second opinion, right? I had a client a few years ago now, but she was sent to my chambers by the solicitor, and I thought it was a conference to talk about her case. She didn't tell me until I first saw her at court a few months later, but she was actually interviewing me. She was interviewing me because she thought, look, I need a barrister, a certain sort of barrister. I need someone that I'm going to be able to trust, someone that I can personally relate to. And so she interviewed 3 barristers, and then she went back to her solicitor and she said, I want Darren to do this job for me. Now, I think that's really smart. A lot of people just rely on their solicitors to choose barristers. Well, sometimes those barristers can be their friends or whatever, colleagues or whatever. I'm not saying all of them. And there's a lot of family law barristers, and there's a lot of good family law barristers. So, and family law is a bit different than other law because you do share a personal relationship as well as a professional relationship with your client. You do want someone who understands your language. So go and get a second opinion or a third opinion, Don't be scared of lawyers. You
But
know,
Darren,
we're all
I,
professionals.
I blame Hollywood. You know, have you ever seen in
Yep.
any high stakes law case or whatever it is, the lawyer is jumping across the the
Yeah.
queue and Your Honor, you know what I mean? And people
Yeah.
now just think that's exactly what happens, you know what I mean? You should have seen
No.
the amount of push-ups that I did in order to come on this call today because I needed to.
Yeah, no, that's Hollywood. I love their cross-examination. It's usually 3 or 4 questions, and then, they get the client off. It's hilarious. But yeah, no, it's rubbish, absolute rubbish. You know, and not forgetting that. Look, I'm not saying people don't get heated at some stages, and lawyers and judges and some witnesses, but at the end of the day, with parenting cases. And I always remember this, it's a positive inquiry into the best interests of a child. And so it doesn't require Hollywood jumping around and, it just doesn't require that. We should all be respectful of people, given the privileged position we hold. And we're really risk assessors. I'll give my client advice and I'll say, look, you're taking a risk going into court. But if you go into court, if that's what you want me to do, well, we'll go into court. We'll fight your case as hard as we can. But you've got to know that there are certain risks, but it shouldn't be the Roman arena of gladiators, and blood in the dust, because how does that help parents and how does that help children, Court, people are silly if they go into court. I'm not saying that some people haven't got choices, but they're really silly because when you think about it, Prosper, why would you let a judge make a decision about your children when that judge, although they're trying to do the best they can, they don't know your kids.
Yeah.
You don't know what that judge's belief system is or biases are. I mean, why would you risk that? I just don't get it. And what we know from the courts is that parents that do agree, that do get to a consent arrangement, they're the arrangements that work very well, But the ones enforced upon them by a judge, those arrangements sometimes break down.
Oh, absolutely. You did mention a lot of trauma, a lot of work that needs to happen. It's a lot of ego as well that happens in the court of law, and that anticipation of winning and zero-sum game and things of that nature. But Darren, I don't think I have any more questions for you.
You've worn me out. I will say what my nana always says: man proposes, God disposes.
I can't thank you enough for the time that we spent on the call today. I mean, your life story and your experience and what it is that you're doing have so much value, and I just can't wait to see what people are going to do with this information. But now that you've brought us into your world, what's next? What can we come in and start looking out for and maybe celebrating, and things that you're working on or things that we can be on the lookout for?
Yeah, well, you can find all this on Instagram and the web, but Vincent Papaleo, who's a dear friend of mine, but also a esteemed expert in the family law area, he's a psychologist. We run a Tough Tell series, which we are running around the country, and particularly through family law pathways as well, where we talk about parental alienation, refuse, resist dynamics. I show my 2 films. We tease out the messages in those films. That's been really useful. I'm doing a musical at the moment, which is fun, called You're in Town, which is at Altona. I'm also we've got a couple of projects, as I said, that are on the whiteboard at the moment. We're getting a script made, hopefully for a big Hollywood movie, based on family law issues, and I'm hoping to get up a television series based on family law issues as well. So yeah, there's lots in the pipeline, and I'm really excited about those, and excited that I have the opportunity to do it. I'm a member of Pacifica Congress, so if you've got any people out there who are psychologists, social workers, health professionals, lawyers, Pacifica Congress, I'm one of the board directors. We have big conferences once a year. And we tackle a lot of issues to do with kids, And that's a really worthwhile organisation for people to have a look at, as well as our charity, To Be Love Network. We're having a big fundraising day at Brighton Theatre. Gee, you think I'd know the date? It's in November, but you can look out for it on my socials. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn. Have a look. It'll be advertised. It's for the public to come along. We're hoping to get the Assistant Commissioner of Police there and for family violence, and it's going to be a hoot. So there's lots coming up, Prosper.
Absolutely. Even I'm looking up some of these things because I don't want to miss out on what you guys are creating. But wow, what an incredible conversation. I mean, thank you so much, Darren, for being so open, honest, and generous with your experience. I did hear a knock on my door. That wasn't somebody sending me a bill, right? Because it
no. I wouldn't send you a bill, Prosper.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And for those that are listening,
but I was going to say, I always tell my clients, the Karma bus is always around the corner and it's always looking for passengers.
Absolutely. I really appreciate that. And for those that are listening and watching, thank you so much for having stayed in with us. And I think this was quite entertaining of an episode. And I hope you actually felt the wealth and, the actual weight and wonder of what it actually takes to stand in that gap between children and families, and also turn that pain that you experienced as a child into purpose. So if this conversation actually struck something in you, here's what I want you to do next. Obviously, I encourage you to subscribe to the Online Prosperity Show because you don't want to miss out on any of the conversations that we have with these. But I'm going to ask this with utmost love and respect. Please share this episode with somebody who might find healing and hope in what we've actually just discussed. I mean, there could be a friend in conflict, a parent, or just somebody working on some sort of transformation. As Darren said, yes, there are ambulances at the end of the cliff, but we encourage that we reach out to the people before they even attempt that actual jump. And Darren has created tools, systems, and processes that could actually help in terms of books, movies, and charities that will actually be that safety net that is required before people make it to the bottom of the cliff. And you can check out any of these instruments on Instagram and LinkedIn. I'll be putting all those in links and the show notes below. And I really hope that this message reaches the one person it was actually intended for. And if that's you, I hope you do what you can with this information. So let this be more than a podcast or a fun conversation between Darren and myself. Let this be the spark for your own next act of a transformation, be it whatever it is that you need. And I really encourage you to share this episode. Go leaning into the hard work that needs to happen. And until next time, bye for now.